Many years ago, when I was a wee lad, I used to let title screens sit on repeat. Oftentimes it was because I was in a weird limbo where I wanted to play the game, but I also knew that I already cleared it 100%, so firing it up wasn't going to offer many new adventures. This was something I briefly highlighted in my video about trying to touch the moon in Ocarina of Time. At this point, I basically had two options. Press start, select my file, and find something to do, or flick the power switch on my Nintendo 64 off and wish I had more to do. But what if neither choice had to be made? Because what's super interesting about title screens in general, especially this one, is that what we see is actually taking place in the game's engine. It isn't a movie, it's actually Link as a character riding along a set path with Epona. Now that may sound super obvious because that's what we're observing, but what I'm getting at is this. The Link we see here is our character in the game, but he's not bound to any of our save files. The world we're viewing doesn't quite line up with our typical timeline in Ocarina of Time. It's a paradox of the events that take place in the game. And Link is caught up in the middle of this universe, suspended on his horse for all of time. Unless we intervene, that is. And that's exactly what we're going to do. This is the title screen paradox of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. So a while back, I was messing around with debug menus and other tools for Ocarina of Time when I found myself warping to the title screen. This was of course super interesting to me, but given how the title screen functions, I found myself not being able to do much. However, that's when I got an idea to actually reverse the order of my actions, to be on the title screen and warp out of it, thus transporting this Link to another place prior to loading any save files at all. And lo and behold, it worked. Link spawned in Hyrule Field without his horse, and the world around me seemed normal. That was until I paused the game and took a look at my inventory, and that's when I got a bit perplexed. Link seemed to have nearly every item in the game, but all of his equipment wasn't upgraded at all. I had the Giant's Knife prior to snapping it in two, the Goron Bracelet, Silver Scale, Chicken, and the Egg. But the weirdest part was that Link was an adult, yet he lacked the Ocarina of Time. And beyond that, he also lacked the spiritual stones needed to open the door of time in the first place. Now, this situation I found myself in isn't something new at all. For those who have followed the speedrunning community over the years, traveling back to the title screen in Zelda is something that has been done in various games. From Wind Waker to Twilight Princess to Skyward Sword, etc. Initiating these warps can have interesting side effects too, as usually they are done in an attempt to overwrite the save file with a Link that is more well equipped. In Ocarina of Time's example, if this was done and the game were able to be saved, it'd rewrite the data in the first slot with a file called Link, written in all capital letters. This is the name of the file that is loaded up on the title screen, the one that has all that weird equipment. Essentially, you can skip all the aspects of acquiring the needed medallions in the game and plant yourself in an end-of-game state. But this is where I want to take a step away from the concept from a game perspective, and more so put ourselves in the shoes of Link from a story perspective. The story of the hero of time, who splits the game into multiple timelines depending on his actions, but in this particular situation, finds himself in a timeline that doesn't add up at all. He obviously has a list of accomplishments as outlined by his inventory. He finds himself on horseback bearing the rewards from a long and tiring adventure. But there's a major problem with his adventure he's currently on. He's in the middle of an adventure that never had a beginning. The land Link finds himself in is a completely untouched world. Our map is blank, and we've never actually done any of the things we appear to have done. We start as night turns to day, and immediately a chicken hatches in our inventory. When Navi tries to bug us, she says the Great Deku Tree wanted us to go visit the princess at Hyrule Castle, which is obviously dialogue from the child timeline. But we're an adult now, and Princess Zelda surely isn't waiting for us in the same capacity she was when Link was supposed to be a kid. But in this world, this is basically the only sense of direction we have. So we make our way to Hyrule Castle Town and into the Temple of Time. If Link technically changes back to a child, it's possible we could rekindle the events needed to realign time again. But we run into an interesting roadblock. Upon entering the Temple of Time, we realize that something is out of place. The general thought process was that since we were an adult, we could go through the door of time and transform back into the child we never actually were. Despite not having the 3 spiritual stones, we do find them on the altar, but the door itself is closed off and isn't opened. So we pull out our trusty ocarina, give it a few timely doots, and we wait in anticipation. Although our ocarina appears to be blue in our hands, it's actually not the Ocarina of Time. We don't have the Ocarina of Time because Zelda never threw it to us, because we were never a kid who actually gathered the 3 spiritual stones. We don't have a past, really. Despite this, the door begins to crack open, even though it shouldn't, so let's talk about that. First, stepping away from the story for a moment and talking strictly about the game side of things, technically it could be possible to clip through the door and turn into a child even if the door didn't open. Speedrunners do this often as child Link, but doing it as adult Link is a bit more rare to see. If Link were to make it to the other side of the door, he'd see the cutscene for becoming an adult immediately as soon as he crossed it. Sheik would then block the pedestal from him and tell him to go to Kakariko Village, despite us having both the hookshot and forest medallion. And as soon as that cutscene finishes, our child cutscene starts. With Sheik still standing at the pedestal from the adult timeline, we gaze upon Sheik's legs as if they are the Master Sword and admire it from afar. Once this cutscene is over, we realize we can't do anything in the room because Sheik is still there. And to make matters worse, we're actually trapped in here. The door of time behind us blocks our path, so we'd have to save and reload, clear the Forest Temple boss, and return. But that's taking us far from where we actually are story-wise. So let's get back to that second point. From the story perspective, Link can't become a child. He can't open the door of time, and he can't glitch through walls. The Ocarina of Time was never given to him, and the only reason his ocarina looks blue is because the game can't have adult Link holding the fairy ocarina, since it's normally replaced before he ever becomes an adult. In this timeline, Link learned the Song of Time without grabbing the Ocarina of Time, so he's missing a part of the key. That is why his childhood is sealed off from a story perspective. It's unknown if he'd know what to do at this point too. Does this Link have the knowledge of all his previous accomplishments, or is he a blank slate? Does he even know Zelda's imprisoned? Regardless, Navi still presses us to head towards the castle, where the sages rebuild the bridge. If Link were to wander anywhere else in this world, fragments of a broken timeline would sprinkle in and start to repair his reality, but he'd still be forever banned from returning to his childhood during the events of the game. So his only real option is to head to Ganondorf's castle and end his reign of evil. Ganondorf's castle is relatively the same since Link has all his equipment needed to solve the various rooms. However, there was one section I had my doubts about initially. In the forest section of the castle, Link typically plays the Song of Time to restore a block so he can grab a silver rupee. When remembering this section, I thought it was going to cause a problem, as technically Link should be able to summon these blocks without the Ocarina of Time. But it turns out you honestly don't need this block at all, and you can just use your hover boots to glide through the area and grab the rupee. Given that this is the only roadblock, Link can now defeat Ganondorf and complete the cycle. But even so, the timeline is still completely out of whack due to the sequence breaking the game went through. Zelda wouldn't have to request Link to give the ocarina back in the game's final cutscene because he never received it. But with his power, she can certainly send Link back through time. But what a bizarre state of events this puts us in. Now, throughout the whole ordeal, it's important to suspend disbelief and just humor the idea for the fun of it. But we still have to come back to that paradox situation. If Link has all these items and knowledge, yet lacks the key tools to implement them, did his childhood actually exist? Because if we head to Kakiri Forest, the Deku Tree is still alive even though we are an adult. His leaves are green and his coloring hasn't been sapped from his bark. That means in this current timeline, the Kakiri's Emerald was given to someone else. We don't have it, but it was placed within the Temple of Time. Again, this is a result of the game's sequence being broken, but we're applying these broken characteristics directly to the game's story. Instead of being from the past, it's almost as if this Link was from a different dimension. If you were to return to the past with all the things he collected on his journey, despite a lot of them being obtained during that era, he'd find himself being able to obtain them again. Which takes us back to the ultimate question. Does Link have recollections of the past? If not, the world he's going back to is going to be strange. At some point, he had to have existed in Kakiri Forest. But given the circumstances, he disappeared before ever making it to the Deku Tree. Perhaps that's when the switch happened. Maybe he does have recollections of the past, but not from this timeline. Maybe he did collect the items elsewhere before being spit back into this one. Overall, it's quite a lot to think about. Sure, it's a bit of a silly concept, and obviously the developers just filled Link's standard inventory, but the fact that this Link is equipped the way he is just gets my mind racing with fun possibilities. This Link was never supposed to be accessible, but many skilled players have found a way through wrong warping in the game. By triggering a game over, they are given the option to save their game, and now this Link finds himself copied to the first save file. There's something really neat about that, and it's definitely fun to ponder about. But I've been rambling on for a bit now. What are your thoughts about this Link from a story perspective? Got any fun takes yourself? Let me know in the comments below. And with that, thanks for tuning in, guys and gals, and until my next video, cheers.